Assalamu alaikum. Today, my guest on Progeny Podcast is Mohamed Ridha Hamid. I've known Mohamed for a very long time, alhamdulillah. Had the honor of working alongside Mohamed for a short while. Mohamed was one of the founders of CYC, the first youth groups for the Iraqi community in northwest London. He was also part of Ahl Bayt TV at the start. And there's so much that Mohamed's been involved to. Inshallah, we'll get to that. Mohamed, thank you for joining us. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you for inviting me. Honored to be invited on your podcast.
I want to start by, because we grew up around the same time in the 90s in the UK. Both our parents, I believe, came as asylum seekers.
Yes.
Both our parents didn't speak English well. But both our parents are also involved in the community. And I know that your father was quite influential in the community. He was part of a lot of the events that took place. Still is doing his thing. How was it growing up in the UK? With parents maybe that don't speak English yet. You had to study English. Your first language obviously was Arabic, but then I'm guessing right now it's probably English.
It is English, yeah. Good place to start. I mean, growing up in the UK, I've always felt, as with many of us with a similar background, is we grew up with two identities. So you had your identity at home, speaking Arabic at home with your parents, or within your community. And then you had your identity at school. And one of my earliest memories is probably, I think, year 2 or year 1, where my English wasn't great. And my name was, now it's Mohamed Hamid, but originally it was Al-Khazraji, which is my original Arabic name. And I didn't know how to spell it. And I remember being bullied at that age. You can't spell your name, Al-Khazraji. And I used to find it very difficult to spell it. And my parents didn't even quite spell it correctly. So eventually my father changed it to Hamid. And for him it was easier to spell and easier to pronounce. So that's why I changed it to Hamid. But growing up in at a age, you always had a sense of two identities. One at home, one at school or with your colleagues. And I think only recently I've been tried to merge those two together.
That's a difficult thing. I think, subhanAllah, you mentioned the two identities, and this was maybe 20 years ago. And then there's still, I feel, lectures or conferences even that take place, or even there's talks about this identity crisis issue where certain people have a identity at home and then a different one at school or college or work, and then it's difficult to merge that. So the same problem that was there 20 years ago is still there. You were influenced by your father because that sense of giving back to the community, and till now obviously the main lectures in our mosques are in Arabic. It was a problem then for those that couldn't speak Arabic. It's still a problem maybe where some youth feel disconnected from the Arabic lectures, not because maybe they don't speak Arabic, but because maybe the topics that the speaker is maybe addressing doesn't really relate to them. And then so you took it upon you. You were one of the founders. I believe there was a few of you, correct?
There was a few of us, yeah.
Of Cricklewood Youth Club.
Cricklewood.
It started as a website.
Yes. Well, actually, it started off as a football group.
Okay.
So if we take back to the start, you're quite right in saying we grew up where the lectures were in Arabic. They didn't really appeal to us. I remember growing up in Majalis where everything was in Arabic. And when you were really young, you didn't quite understand what was happening. And then in the early teenage years, a group of us got together under Emir Taqi, and we formed a football group. And through that, we were meeting regularly, doing training sessions. And it started from there originally. And then the website was born as a football website for that football group. And as the internet kind of grew and the potential for it grew, I distinctively remember sitting with Emir Taqi, and this was outside Acton Town Station.
Okay.
And I remember this in my head. We were in his car, and he was saying to me, Mohamed or Ridha, he was saying, look, you have to use your skills to give back. You have to give back. I'm sure you've heard Emil give these kind of talks. You've got a skill in doing websites. You've done this website. Use it. Why don't you make a website for CYC? And it was that night was probably where it started. And taking Emil's advice, I set up the website. Back then, it was a very simple website. It was using GeoCities, which was a service from Yahoo, where you can just set up a basic website. And it started from there. It started from an interest both in having an interest in technology, enjoying how computers talk, and then using the internet to help bring people together. That's where it sort of started.
Yeah, this was before the world of Facebook and
and
Instagram and
this was 2004, 2005. Before all that, and it was a world of forums. So the forums were the biggest asset for CYC.
Yeah. Do you remember any of the topics or discussions that used to take place? Because it got quite popular within our community.
It did. Yeah. I mean, before that, you had the website called Shia Chat.
Yeah.
Which I think is still around.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I logged in the other day.
Okay.
It's still active.
Okay.
But what made CYC unique was that it was more focused to the London community. So the types of discussions we had, originally it was, I remember, a boys' club. So it was just the boys from the football group. And I remember the first female that we had, and it was like everyone's a bit apprehensive. What's this? Why is there women on the forum? And then it grew, and it became more of a. At that age, when you're a teenager, 16, 17, your mind is developing. So you have a lot of questions about your religion. Why do I follow this? You have questions about your identity. I'm a Shia Muslim. So what are my beliefs? So there were a lot of discussions around that. And then I remember further down the years, we invited special guests. So we had Sayyid Ammar al-Qashwani, for example, for a short period of time. We had Sheikh Hilli, who was a special guest on the website. So you had a specific forum for them. Any questions, they'd answer the questions there and then. One thing I'd also like to point out in terms of the media sites today is you had this thing where people wanted to write essays because it was in a forum format, big in deep debates. Everyone would write massive essays, but so as such, people would make sure the grammar was right, spelling was right, and even those things, because they didn't want to look stupid, or didn't want to look that their point was being made in the right way. And I remember talking with a friend, we're like, in today's world in social media, it's not really about long discussions anymore. It's about quick tweets or short snaps.
Everything's like that now.
Everything's like that now, yeah.
Even
before it was like long discussions,
the reels.
essays. Oh, the reels, yeah.
Yeah, everything's become quick. People want information quick. People don't want to spend more than a minute watching a video or listening to a lecture. That's why I think a lot of people have turned to, making little clips maybe out of a certain talk. And even it's become everything's fast food.
Yes.
Everything's fast. Everything. But like you said before, people went into details.
Yeah.
People, when they discuss things, and I remember there'd be pages and pages of people responding to each other about a particular point. Which brings me to the question: do you think that even though with the rise of technology and the internet and all these social media apps, again, I don't want to generalize, but the youth today, have they become more, I don't want to use the word ignorant, but less informed about certain topics, for example, within religion than before, and hence why maybe the crisis of identity has become worse today? Do you know where
I think I know where you're going.
Or is it because before maybe sahih we it's true that we had an identity at home maybe and one outside, but others, every week we'd be at the mosque, CYC. There's some bases we'd still attend the lectures, but the forum reading, people were reading more maybe. How many people read today? Pick up a book and actually read, or even on Kindle. Today people want information quick.
I think you're right, because when I think about back to those times, yes, we had long discussions, long forums, but I also remember on a personal level, there were websites such as alislam.org. You'd go to there, and find the books.
I still use that website.
Oh, mashallah.
I love that website.
And I remember, like, any debate you'd have, you'd refer to that. I still even remember this, quite ignorant when I was young at college. We'd have debates. You bring your books out, but you're quite right in saying, like, as in when I look at media now, or social media, and the way we use the internet, because it's such fast paced, like a bit like fast food, maybe the way we ingest knowledge is different. I've noticed, as you mentioned, speakers are trying to use modern platforms to quickly give nuggets. So the reels you mentioned, I've seen speakers use these reels and just point to certain parts. But the danger with that is you don't see the full context. And so then you only see one certain part. And I think that is genuinely an issue with media in itself. Sometimes people, if you just follow what you see and don't read into it, then you're not really seeing the bigger picture. So I think you're right in saying that maybe there is that case. I don't know what to call it.
Yeah, I don't.
Identity crisis 2.0,
Yeah.
maybe.
Talking of media, you and again maybe your relationship with Emir. I'm guessing the family relationship as well, and that both families are quite close. Was that the reason that led you sort of to work, even though I feel it was 2 years, I think, or a year and a half at Ahl Bayt TV?
Yeah, it might have been less than a year.
Oh, was it less than a year?
I think it was a mixture of both. Like, again, Emir's a very close friend, and I remember him sitting me down and saying, look, media is the
He
way
gave you that
forward.
talk again.
He gave me that talk. We're talking. Media's the way forward. Things are changing. Your father was, he had his magazine. Now it's time for the age of TV. And it was 2009. I was just about graduating from uni, and it was the recession as well, or the crash. And so it was difficult to find a job in my area. So I said to him, I'm more than happy to join you at Ahl Bayt TV. And it was an exciting time, early 2009 or late 2009. Everything we done was new. The lives were new. The first time we had Karbala live, I remember the buzz and excitement. So everything was brand new. Inviting guests. So there's a bit of circumstances and a bit of wanting to give back as well.
I want to get into what you're doing right now, but before that, at 16, 17, 18 or onwards, while you're still studying, and alhamdulillah, you got a degree, you still had time for the community. And this word, which I've mentioned and you've mentioned now a few times, giving back. What do you think the reason? What's your what's behind you giving back? Because the CYC or the forum or the events that you did weekly, you weren't getting paid for it.
No.
So why do you think you made time, even though you're still studying, you've got exams, you've got a degree? What was the reasons for you taking time out to do this and to give back to your community, do you think? Now looking back at it, obviously.
Yeah, when I look back, I think number one, I have to say my father, because I grew up in an environment seeing my father, who was the editor-in-chief of a prominent magazine, and the time and investment he gave to that. That was sort of what was around me, and then growing up, he sort of instilled in me that you got to give back. This is your community. And I mentioned earlier when we talked about the identities. So as I grew up, I could see formalizing in my head. I've got the Iraqi community, or Muslim Shia Iraqi community, and I've got my other community, and I would start to see that there's an advantage here. We have this community. We have this group of people. We can better ourselves by each and every one of us giving back a skill set that we had. And I think along with the influence of my father, and also being at home where my father, I remember he bought me the first PC, which was a Windows 98. And I thought, I had this tool, let me use this. And it does take me back to some of the nights. I used to spend a lot of nights till like 3, 4 a.m. at that age, just working on the website. We had this feature that we introduced, which called it seasons. So you had, for example, a season on Nabi Mohamed, and it would be all like a website's pages dedicated to him. And back then, the technology for websites, it was like Web 1.0, where you do every single part, work on the HTML, and it was a sense of, I've done this, people are going to benefit from it, and I've got this skill set. Everyone has to give back. And I had this mentality where I was under the impression that everyone gives back. You know, everyone has their skill,
Yeah.
whatever you have, whether it's reciting, lecturing, like yourself. You know, everyone gives back, and that's really what was instilled in me from a young age.
Does giving do you think you reach an age where you say I'm gonna stop giving back now? Someone else has to do it.
I don't think that is the case. I think maybe you might take a step back a little, but the reason why I don't think it's the case is because in whatever capacity, whether you give back at work, with your own community.
Yeah, I'm talking about more maybe your own community.
Yeah.
I guess because maybe you see your father as well. He's not stopped.
It hasn't stopped yet.
Yeah.
And also, I think there's benefits to it as well. There's mental benefits of giving back. You feel good by helping others. And there's a sense of duty as well. Even more recently, maybe I haven't given back as much as before. There's still a sense of duty that you have to sort of empower each other. And this sense of empowerment is a strong one. And whether it's a website, whether it's encouraging others to be fit, there is a sense of power in doing that. And you benefit yourself and you benefit others in doing it.
I mean, even after you left Ahl Bayt TV, it didn't mean you weren't giving back to your community, because you had the Imam Hussein conference, which ran for a few years, and inshallah will continue. And you were very passionate about this. You're one of the lead members of Imam Hussein conference, which was an annual conference in the name of Imam al-Hussein, and you brought speakers from around the world to do this one-day conference. And again, just like with the CYC and just like with the Ahl Bayt TV, when the Imam Hussein conference started, there was a buzz. I think if it does happen again, there'll still be that buzz where you come listen to different speakers, and one day about Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. How did that start, and what was your involvement in the conference?
That started, I remember, 2011. It was myself, I remember Mehdi Hamza, I think Karim Husseini. We sat down, and there was an idea that every Muharram you have all these speakers coming in internationally, in London, Manchester, and why don't we bring them together? And all of us remember. For me, I remember the first ever lecture in English was Sayyid Mehdi Mudarrisi, 2003. And his lectures in that year had a profound impact on me. It was the first time I see someone, A, wearing amama, and B, speaking with the same accent that we can understand. Not with the, before we had people speaking English, but there was an Arabic accent to it. This was like pure English accents, which we could relate to. So fast forward to 2011, it was about, well, we have all these speakers. If we bring them under one roof, that could create a powerful impact. And that was the first year. And then the following years, it was about, let's pick a theme. What do we normally not talk about? And let's get the speakers to talk about that theme. But I think what underpins all that was bringing people together. Yes, you've got keynote speakers, but the fact that we were able to bring people together. And for me, what I remember poignantly was one of the years we had Najah Bizzi, and she talked about hijab, but she brought her unique style in the way she approached it. And for the first time, I don't think I've seen it again since, you had people clapping. They clapped her and they gave like a send-off, which I've never seen before. But for me, that the reason why I remember it is because I could feel people were impacted by her talk. And that is what sort of what the appeal was and what it was all about. I think underneath, really.
Is there a comeback for the conference, do you think?
Is there a comeback? I don't know. It's difficult to say because you're right. There was a buzz in the beginning, but I do feel times have changed.
But since the conference stopped, there hasn't been an Imam Hussein conference. Maybe there's been other conferences. There was recently the Mainstay conference, which is now taking place every year. Great work by the guys. But with regards to Imam al-Hussein, and it was because it was Muharram, there's still speakers coming every Muharram.
There still is, yes.
So do you think there's a return?
I hope so, but I probably logistically, that's probably why there hasn't been. Because there's a lot of stress, as you can imagine, getting involved, financial stress. I think there needs to be a new strategy, maybe, in terms of raising funds for something like this, because it was all voluntary work.
Yeah.
And getting the funds was a bit of begging people, a bit
Yeah.
of, can you give us this, a bit of
The
last
story
minute.
of my life.
Is that?
Yeah.
I think you can relate to it.
Yeah.
So after a while, it was, well, we've done this for 5 years, and I think the last year we did it was in SOAS University.
Okay.
And, 2016 it was,
Mhm.
and then we just felt we always had the intention of wanting to bring it back.
The intention is still there. Yani.
It's still there, but then, as you can probably relate to, there's one thing having the intention, but then actually doing it is a whole different thing.
Yeah, because a lot of work, people come, they see 1 day conference and they think, the guys organized it for a day. They don't know the months of preparation.
Yeah.
The time out you take just to get this. But I think one of the biggest hurdles, which you mentioned, is the finance of things. And I think this is the hurdle that a lot of organizations within, especially the Iraqi community, face. Do you think there's a solution? Because, I look at other maybe communities, and I think obviously finance is a problem everywhere, especially today. But I think the Iraqi community struggles more maybe than the other Muslim communities.
I'm sure there is a solution, but it's a difficult one. I'm sure there is a solution, because our community is quite embedded now in this country, and I think, mashallah, we've got a lot of well-off people that are doing well. But it's about maybe instilling a system of maybe financially giving back. It's easy to say, but I don't know.
Are we a community that want to give back?
Are we?
Finance, when it comes to I mean, again, not generalizing, but a lot of people expect things to be done by this mosque or that organization or this institution or this marji'iyah's office, but they maybe find it difficult to put their hands in their pocket. And
I think generally we're quite a well-off community, as in there's a lot of centres we have, and
but there's that sense of expectation from them that we expect them to do it. Why should I?
There is. And I think that's sometimes I fall into that trap where why doesn't this centre do this? Why do I have to do it? And that's not the right way of thinking. I think you should try and. I always tell myself this: don't have that mentality. If you fall into that trap, try and think beyond that. But that's what I meant. It can get a bit stressful sometimes when you're constantly trying to seek funds. I think there are ways around it now. Like now, you've got the internet. There's ways to gather money, donations through the internet. Different to what it was before. Maybe better. Raising funds. I think recently I've been raising funds through the running I've been doing.
Yeah.
And I've noticed maybe in Ramadan people are more willing to give in these months. So yeah, I think maybe.
Yeah, you're right. I think there's definitely solutions. But I think that, again, this is my view on that. I think some think they're still on vacation here. In the Iraqi community, they still think this is not home. In the back of their minds, even maybe they've bought a house here, but in the back of their mind, they still think this is temporary. Yeah, and I think a lot of the Iraqis, when they left Iraq, a lot of them were forced to leave Iraq. I'm sure your family were forced to leave, otherwise your dad wouldn't want to leave. But the ones that were forced to leave, when they came to this country, some of them thought that this is temporary, or inshallah will, but they're not. They're still in that temporary phase. They're still on this long vacation. They haven't realized, by the way, no, we're here to stay. So let's build a foundation for our kids, for our grandkids, and I think that's one issue that I think the community faces. I
think you've touched on a very good point there, because you're right. I think, and that might be one of the reasons why we did face, like on a personal level, why we did face this crisis of identity. Because I do remember my parents always talking about, well, Iraq, one day we'll go back, one day we'll do this, and then even the way I feel they integrated into this country, was like you said, it was a temporary thing. But only now, for example, the work that you're doing with Al Haraka on Thursdays, I see that as, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're really doing that for your kids and for the new generation,
100%.
because you're seeing now that we are here to stay, and these kids need a sense of identity, which is important. And the weekly programs that we had, like I really do feel, going back to your earlier question about giving back, it's who your friends are. So, for example, the original Haraka on Fridays with Sayyid Ammar, for me, it had a profound effect on my identity. It shaped
100%.
who I am.
100%.
Because going into that weekly, seeing shabab from different backgrounds, not conforming to the divisions our parents had, and then, back then, if you remember, there was like a reputation about or whatever, but you're going there to learn something. And you're picking, and yes, there was the Quran tafsir that Sayyid Ammar gave, but also there was the social aspect. And that was strong. And out of that, you had the Umrah trips that they organized. And I helped volunteer with them.
We're following in the same direction.
So you see what I mean? These kids that you're doing with 10 years down the line, like myself now, they'll think back and think, this is my identity. This is what formed and shaped my friends. And that's important. And that makes you strong, really.
Yeah, I think you touched on an important point about the social aspect. I mean, I've said when we do our events that there needs to be three important factors embedded in the events that we do, and that educational. So you got to educate them about their religion, spirituality. So you've got to give them that sense of spiritual feeling when they come, and that, for example, can be obtained through the recitation of Dua Kumail. And the third, and I feel they're equally important, the third is the social aspect. Hence why recently, for example, we make sure like we don't give takeaway food. Rather, we get them to sit down and eat in the hall so they can speak to each other. So if you can build on those three, the education, the spirituality, and I think the social aspect, you can help people to have that sense of identity. Yasser behind the cameras is one of the volunteers, and I don't think he's ever missed a haraka, maybe one or two. Have you missed any harakas, Yasser?
No, MashaAllah.
Just one?
But that was involuntary.
You had to miss it.
Forced to.
Yeah, he was forced to. So he's there.
Yeah.
And I think maybe if the progeny is there in 5 years, we'll speak to Yasser and see how, because you're right, it's your friends, your environment that impacts.
Exactly, yeah. And goes back to the other question about the sense of giving back, because you see everyone giving back, and people that gave lectures there. And I remember I don't know who it was, maybe it was Sayyid Ammar or Hassan Mubarak or Emir, or maybe must have failed. It was like, I'm dropping all these names, but they were like, each one of you have to give talks, and they would make you give a little talk before the main lecture. But you can see why they're doing that, because they're trying to build your own leadership skills for everyone that was young at that age.
Subhanallah, the same issues, and then 20, 30 years down the line, but I think we're progressing. Talking of progress, and you mentioned the feeling good factor when you give back. You turned, I feel, to something else with the feeling good, and that was the running.
Yes.
Subhanallah, a few weeks ago we had someone who done the marathon as well here. And I think last year we had someone who also done the marathon, Hassanain, and then we had Arif, and yourself. And I think it became a trend. I don't know when you started, but around COVID time, a lot of people tried the running. I tried it as well for a bit. Very difficult. How did that come about with that?
So yeah, the London Marathon was a culmination of many things, and I think it really for me started 2015. Again, it was a discussion with one of your previous guests, Hassan Kubba. It was telling me about sugar. So he was giving me lectures about how bad sugar is, it's not good for you. And so again, following his advice, I took some research, did some research about sugar levels, and so I changed my sugar intake. And then I thought, well, if I'm changing my food, I should change my approach to fitness. So I started going to the gym, lost a bit of weight. But rightly, as you said, in 2020, when the COVID hit, there wasn't many sports we can do. So in similar fashion to bringing people together, I sort of put together, and it wasn't intentional. It was just circumstances. No one's doing any sports. We had football that was stopped, but running was one of the only things we could do. So created a WhatsApp group and added a lot of shabab in it, and said, look, if you wanna, let's make it a bit more fun. Let's make it a challenge. Who can run most distance? We'll create like a leadership board. So you're right in saying that became a trend. Running became a trend, and it's kind of really took off from there. Running, the first year 2020 was running and cycling. Those were the two big things. We formed a group together of cyclists, and then it was more focused on the running. And I still continue the running. I think
because you lost quite a lot of weight.
I did, yes. Before COVID hit, I went through so this is where the journey. I went through like a body transformation through a personal coach. Again, it was changing the relationship with food. Asian communities, we have this. I think we don't really have a healthy relationship with our food in terms of understanding what we're eating. So I remember when I was young, my father would bring a lot of bread, and then more recently, it's like when I started that transformation, it was eating a lot of rice, but I thought rice was bad. But then I realized actually no, rice is good for you, but it's the portions of rice that you take. So that was part of the journey, the losing the weight and then the running. And for me now, the running is
how many people were involved in this group that you created? Because there was quite.
It was maybe 20, 30.
They're all running, and then everyone's checking how much everyone's running,
checking
and
how
where they're
much,
running.
Yeah, and you had people who've never ran running, and I think it was nice being people together virtually, but through the form of running.
And this year, I think you participated in your first full marathon. You've done a half marathon.
Yeah, I had done quite a few half marathons.
Okay.
And then naturally, the progression was let's do a full marathon, and that came about through these groups. I think Stanmore Jaffery's have a running group. So one of the brothers there.
You done it obviously also for a charity.
I did it for the charity, yes. And the running before that was for a charity as well. And that was really inspired by one of the brothers called Harun Muta, and he done lots of work. And I've seen his story in Ramadan. He's gone out and done running, raising funds for charity. So I think for 2 years in a row, I used Ramadan as a way of trying breaking the mold a bit, because obviously fasting is very important, spirituality is very important, but adding fitness element to it as a challenge, I thought was a unique thing, and combining it with fundraising, so you're raising money for good charitable need. A, you get some thawab, and B, you're encouraging people to run and breaking that mental barrier of, well, if we're fasting, we can't do anything athletic. You can, and it's all about putting your mind to it. But one thing I want to touch upon is that when you run, there is a spiritual aspect to it as well.
Okay. How?
So if it's a long run, your mind, at the beginning you might be thinking about a lot of things, but then you start just thinking about your life, what's happening in your life. You'll think about
start more focusing on
important things. You start more important things, and it's a form of meditation. So when you're out there by yourself, especially if you're by yourself, usually it's better to run with an individual. But if you're by yourself, it becomes a form of meditation. If it's outside, I remember my runs on the canal, and it suddenly occurred to me that this is a form of meditation. I know we have our salah, obviously 5 times a day,
of course,
but sometimes it can be difficult to focus on that salah. And then it tends to be just Allahu Akbar, and that's it. And then I've done my thing, tick the box, and that's the struggle I feel a lot of times.
Yeah,
that it's just tick the
100%
box.
agree.
So I thought, running, I'm actually thinking about things, and maybe this is what salah should be, but I'm not doing it in salah. So that's why I think I started seeing it from that perspective as well. So I try to incorporate some of that in salah, but yeah, that's why I say running is it's a good form of meditation as well.
And the marathon, how did you find that?
The marathon. So it was challenging.
I've asked to a lot of guys, how many kilometers? Remind me again.
It's 42 kilometers.
42 kilometers
and 26 miles.
And after 5 kilometers, I'm dead. If I'm doing 5.
That was like me. I couldn't do 1 kilometer before, but that's what I said. It was a journey from 2015, and then I think 2022 was the culmination of that. I've now hit the marathon, which I thought would be impossible, but I was very much surprised at the support you get. London Marathon is I think one of the big 6 marathons in the world. But literally from the start to the very end, you've got the crowds there. I think one of your previous guests was saying, cheering you on, calling out your name. So I put my name there. People just shouting, Mohamed, Mo, go Mo. And that kind of encourages you to go through it. But then the last 10K is where you hit what they call the wall. And that's where you really challenge yourself, you know, what you're made of, stopping, starting. And that's what I mean. There's a sense of meditation involved in that.
I think, yeah, you're 100% right that it gives you discipline as well.
Yes.
And that could be used. You said something very important there. Maybe I'm doing something wrong in my salah because it's supposed to be a form of meditation, whereas some of us do our salah as a tick the box. I always use the example of in Shahr Ramadan when I say we pray before we eat sometimes, not because we want to have that relationship with Allah, as in we pray Maghrib and Isha before we have our iftar, not because we want to have that sense of relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because salah is a relationship with Allah, but we want to tick the box so we can eat. We want to get it out of the way. And I've even heard people say, let's pray to get it out of the way so we can eat.
Yeah. I mean,
I've heard people use these terms, get it out of the way.
Yeah.
So yeah, running can be a form of maybe helping your discipline.
Yeah. And just to say, in similar fashion, when you set yourself targets and goals of, you know, I want to do this running event, there are also targets you should set yourself in life as well. And that's where it benefits, because when you have a goal, there's something you're working towards. And that it's that process of working towards it that makes you a better person. So if it's a running as an example, you have the London Marathon. Let's take that as an example. You're training towards that. You know, you want to get towards that. If it's something spiritual, let's say you want to be a better Muslim, you want to better yourself, give yourself a goal. You know, I want to give a talk about something. You're trained towards that, so you research towards that, and then you give a talk. It's all about putting yourself outside the comfort zone, and that's one thing I didn't mention earlier. But for me, it was as I grew as a person, it was what's the next thing I can do that'll be put myself outside the comfort zone, and running at the moment it seems to be that.
Let's make that into a reel, that clip. Yeah, that's a nice reel. Yeah, I think since we mentioned reels, that's a reel. When you and we'll title it set goals for yourself in life. You started off with technology when we first spoke about CYC, and now 15 years nearly down the line, you're a lead infrastructure engineer with a focus on cybersecurity. You're a civil servant now as well. You do that for the government, and that's technology. But you've also now done workshops encouraging people to get into the tech world. We've had a few people on the podcast who are part of this tech world, and the importance of maybe getting a lot of people more involved in this. Obviously, if it's their passion. And I always say it's important to get into a career that you enjoy.
100%.
There was, inshallah, there isn't. There was this. I don't want to call it a problem, but there was this concept that Iraqi parents, and I think other communities as well, but I'll talk about my own, were encouraging their kids to either be dentists, doctors, or pharmacists.
Isn't that still the case?
Probably is. Yeah. I think probably is the case. Not so much like before. Maybe it's maybe less now. And obviously there's nothing wrong with that. If you
of course, yeah.
But the issue is if someone gets into a career that they hate, and if you hate the job that you're doing, imagine you have to do it now every day of your life. Who wants to do something they don't enjoy every day? So You've mentioned previously that you don't have to go down the university route, and maybe some people might say, "Oh, that's quite risky." Everyone has to get a degree.
Yeah.
Do they or not?
No. So yeah, we're quite right in saying technology's always been a big passion of mine, and we talked about it earlier with the website. But it's only recently I've realised that it's been a common theme in my life throughout. So more recently, yes. As you said, my career, I'm quite lucky to say that I do enjoy it. And every day, even when I'm feeling my morale's a bit low, the work involved, I enjoy. And I do feel our community is quite apprehensive, maybe a bit scared of technology when things like privacy issues with WhatsApp appear. I remember everyone jumped to Signal and not knowing quite why they should do it, but you had the media frenzy and telling us stories about WhatsApp. And so I wrote an article back then. I said, look, this is the actual case. This is how WhatsApp works. And
because that's your thing, your cybersecurity.
So I was like, this is how it works, and there really isn't anything to be afraid of. But that theme is like you said. I do want us to get more people in technology, in the tech world. We are very underrepresented as Muslims generally. So if we talk about Iraqi Muslims, then hardly any. But I want us more youth to go down that path. As you said, a lot of us, even me growing up, it was about I've done my GCSEs, A levels, then it's uni, and that's what equals success. That's not right, and that isn't the case. And I've now only realised in the last 10, 15 years when I've hired people, in that process of hiring people, I don't look at what certifications they have or degree or anything. I look at their experience. What have they done? What technologies have they worked with? And that is what I take to see whether or not they meet the job. So young people now, I think the government, I was doing a workshop the other day at Harrow College, and they've introduced in the last 3 or 4 years a thing called T-levels, which is all around about technology. So the government have understood what the sector is saying and developed this course where young people can do it and not necessarily go down the uni path and get an apprenticeship. And one of your past guests, Mohamed or Motivate, he's all about this. He works at Heathrow Airport. And you can see through social media, he's encouraging people to go down this apprenticeship route. And now I would say the same thing. You don't need to go down to uni. And to parents, don't force your kids to go down uni as well. If they're interested in tech, or from a young age, get them interested in tech, coding. There are lots of coding schools for young kids, and that's where we need to be. The world is changing in that direction. Cybersecurity is a big thing. But you might have seen recently, you've got artificial intelligence is a growing thing. You've had artists using, I think, the app Lensa, creating these AI images. You've got Chat GPT, which is a recent one from OpenAI, where you can. The other day, I even said to it, what did I say to it? I said to it, write me a lecture about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the style of Sayyid Ammar al-Khshwani. And it gave me a talk.
Wow.
A short talk. That's where we are with AI. And even that now, you've had people talk about, are they going to take over my job in the tech area? But we need to be in that space, involved in that space, confident enough to talk about it. And when we are as a community, then that makes it stronger.
Hamid, Ridha, Hamid, or Khazraji, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
A prominent member of our community who gave back to the community and still giving back, I think, to the community. So thank you for making time for the Progeny.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. It was an honor.